Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Join in the conversation. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Send a recorded talkback message on the free Central Florida Public Media app. Leave a voicemail by calling 407-273-2300, extension 246. Engage is made possible with the support of listeners like you.
You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. It is Thursday, December the 12th. Jaber Narabia is a first-generation American living in Orlando. The Florida State University graduate owns a coffee shop in the Kissimmee area. His parents emigrated to the United States in the early 1980s after escaping the brutal Syrian regime. For more than 50 years, members of the Assad family ruled the Middle Eastern country using torture, fear, oppression, all to maintain power and control. Then, in a rather sudden turn of events last week, President Bashar al-Assad's government fell to rebel forces in just 10 days. Crowds cheered in the streets when the dictator fled the advancing opposition fighters. Those celebrations are spreading to Central Florida. Earlier today, Jaber Narabia joined Engage to talk about his feelings and family's reaction to the liberation of Syria. He began our conversation by providing some background on what led the Syrian rebels to oust the Assad regime.
The Assad regime took over Syria in the 70s, 60s, 70s. And at that point, there was a somewhat of an uprising that happened in the late 70s in the city of Hama, central Syria, to take over power from somebody like Assad. It was met with an iron fist from the get-go. There was no real kind of media back then in Syria the same way we have it now, but there are stories and official reports of what happened. They crushed it quickly, and they crushed it in a very brutal way. The numbers range between 30 to 40,000 people were murdered in that city in front of their homes, in front of their kids. My dad's family escaped a little bit before the whole thing started. My mother's family escaped during that time. They made it to different countries, went to Jordan, Dubai, around the world. And then my dad immigrated here as a student back in the early 80s with my mother.
And you still have family in Syria that you've been unable to visit since your parents left. Had you been in contact with family in the years prior to this liberation? And, what did they tell you about living under Assad?
So they don't, basically, that's kind of what Syria is. They don't talk about what's living under Assad. You don't talk about this because you disappear. There are stories right now that are coming out of Syria from all these prisoners that came out of jails, been in jails for absolutely minute reasons. I'm hearing about honestly, they're keeping me up at night. It's a bittersweet moment. We are celebrating, but the stories are so horrific. One story that I heard yesterday was of a man that was in jail for 13 years, and his crime was that he didn't stand up and respect whenever a military person walked in front of him. This is the horrors of Syria in extremely bad dungeons for something minute as this. So the family that lived in Syria or stayed in Syria never really talked about the Assad regime, never talked about kind of their life. They talked about how hard it is and how difficult it is from day to day to meet. But other than talking about the actual regime was never something that you can do. And what's extremely heartwarming now is seeing all these people in Syria talking to Western journalists, talking to local journalists freely, something that I honestly, to be completely honest with you, no one ever expected it as of 2 weeks ago.
Have you been in contact in the last couple weeks as the Assad regime fell?
So we tried to contact whoever was there. The communications are still kind of difficult, especially in the city where my parents are from. I called some family members in Turkey and Jordan to see if they got in contact with them. They said it's not that easy. We're pretty sure that they're safe because the city is just an all celebration and order is back.
And I know your mother passed away when you were young. How is your father reacting to this news now?
I'm so sad that she did not see this day coming. My mother died when I was 2. I'm so happy for my dad. My dad can't imagine what happened. My uncles, my aunts, my mother-in-law who also passed recently. All these people suffered under this regime and suffered in displacement, suffered being not being able to visit their country. And to see this for them, I'm happy for them. Then I'm happy for myself. I've never stepped foot into Syria, but I've always felt Syrian from day one. I lived my entire life hearing about the horrors of Hama, and lived the past 14 years seeing kind of what happened with the people when they asked for just some dignity, just some freedom, and they were met with bombs and bullets and barrel bombs. And the UN stopped counting the death toll from the Syrian tragedy at 400. So numbers are in the 600 to 700. People disappeared. Hundreds of thousands of people disappeared, never to know anything about them. And the Syrian regime was extremely good at torturing and not giving people closure, not giving mothers closure. They would just tell them, your son is dead, stop asking about him. And suddenly, last week, we see him coming out of jail. Or people right now being just surrounding prisons, thinking that their loved ones are still there. But from talking to people that went through these jails, saying that no, most likely they killed them. It was an industrial cycle of torture and killing in Syria. Like I said, it's a bittersweet moment seeing all this jubilation and happiness, but at the same time, the heavy toll of what happened to these people. And I'm so grateful. I'm cautiously optimistic about what's happening, but I am happy to see what's happening. There's a lot of good signs that minorities are being protected, orders back. I think the history books. And I hope this stays the case, but they'll write a lot of good things about what just happened, because I never thought order will be back in Damascus in a couple of days. There was a new press release today saying that the colleges are going to open again. This is after 50 years, half a century of a major dictatorship. To be able to bring all that back so quickly shows you how much the people there wanted just an ounce of freedom. And I'm sure that because of what they went through, they won't allow anything to come back to kind of what happened to them back then.
I know you're still processing a lot of things, a lot of developments, everything's changing. Have you given any thought to wanting to visit Syria?
Oh, absolutely. As soon as the government is legitimized, as soon as the US government allows for Americans to visit without any issues, as soon as licenses are given, when things are in order, it will be a dream. It's something that I've always dreamed of. I never thought that I would ever step foot in Syria. And I was hoping to do it with my dad. Most likely, my dad will go in before me. But like I said, as soon as things are in legal order, specifically with our U.S. government here, I'm definitely willing to go visit where my grandparents are from.
We've talked about this a little bit, but can you share more about what you're hearing from members of Central Florida's Syrian community?
So Central Florida Syrian community is big. It's not huge, but it's big, and they're extremely happy. I've had people that I barely know come and just hug me, knowing kind of what we went through. They're ecstatic. They're looking forward to the future. A lot of them are recent immigrants to the U.S. that came during the past 14 years. So they are looking forward to going back, rebuilding. There's a lot of people here that are just waiting for the US to open licenses to people to donate, to make sure that they do everything in legal matter. So people are jubilant and they can't wait to participate.
You mentioned you were cautiously optimistic. So moving forward, as we head into 2025, what are you optimistic about for Syria?
So I'm optimistic about the way things are happening in these past 10 days or 2 weeks. The way that minorities are being protected, the way the Syrians themselves are making sure that things are coming back to order. I'm hearing good things from countries around the world saying that what we're hearing is good. If it continues, we are willing to change our position towards Syria. There's a lot of good things happening and a lot of positive talk. Most of the talk from politicians or heads of state shows that they are looking forward to opening a completely new chapter with the Syrian people and allow Syrians to live a dignified life because they absolutely deserve it after 50 years of dictatorship.
And tell me about what's happening Sunday in Orlando. I think you described it as a celebration.
Correct. Yes, in Orlando, at the Orlando Commons Plaza, we were going to be coming in just to celebrate, and it's extremely a very surreal moment for me because we've had a lot of protests, and every time it's usually an announcement saying that protests for Syria, protest against chemical weapons, protest against dictatorship. This is the first time I'm actually going to a celebration for Syria, a not a protest. We're just there to celebrate this massive win and look forward to the future. Hopefully, it gets a lot better for them.
What does being Syrian mean to you as someone born in the United States?
I never really thought about that question that deeply. I've whenever the revolution started in 2011, I felt extremely connected to it. I wanted to do my part. My part being with our privileged life here in the U.S. And I actually got to know Syria through the lenses of the people there. The sad part is I also got to know Syria through the videos, the horrific videos of barrel bombs and destruction. And my family, we are the first generation, my generation, to live outside our city of Hama. My parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, they all uh, were born, raised, and died in that city. And my parents were the first people to forcibly leave their city. So it's one of those things that I don't know how to explain it, honestly. I feel like I'm deeply rooted. I'm as American as anybody else, but at the same time, I'm as Syrian as all Syrians, in my opinion. And you can have two complete identities.
Jaber Narabia is a member of the American Coalition for Syria in Orlando. There's more ahead here on Engage. A newcomer to the Winter Park community talks about taking over as Rollins College next president. If you are heading out, you can listen to Central Florida Public Media's Engage live on the radio at 90.7 FM in Greater Orlando and the Space Coast and 89.5 FM in Ocala and the Villages. Or you can stream us live at cfpublic.org or on the free Central Florida Public Media app. You can tell your smart speaker to play Central Florida Public Media. Thank you for listening to Engage. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, an Orlando-based performance troupe is bringing Christmas back to the Victorian area with broad audience appeal.
We really run the gamut of all the ages because we are appealing to horror lovers. We are appealing to literature lovers. There's an appeal to theater lovers and, of course, dance.
Lord Byron of Phantasmagoria emerges from the shadows to discuss a spirited way to spend the holidays. First, though, about 3,000 students are enrolled in Rollins College in Winter Park. In the U.S. News and World Report 2025 rankings of best colleges, Rollins is the top-ranked private institution among regional universities in the South. The Board of Trustees concluded the search for the person who will lead the institution in the years ahead by announcing Brooke Barnett will serve as their 16th president. She will replace Grant Cornwell. He's retiring in June 2025 after a decade at the helm. Barnett joined Engage shortly after the college made the announcement about her hiring. She began our discussion by explaining how she made her way from an Indiana PBS station to a career in higher ed administration.
I was interested in journalism as a way to think about changing the world and doing good in the world and thinking about the power of the media and press and loved that work. And while I was working as a journalist, I was the news director of a public television station that was housed on Indiana University's campus in Bloomington. So 45,000 students, large public university. And I was teaching in the journalism program there and loved teaching. And then I started doing a research project with a graduate student and another faculty member and really fell in love with research, doing mentored research with students, advising. So I was like, well, these are two of the major aspects of faculty life. So I was kind of considering maybe if I wanted to move into a faculty role as a result of that. And what really was the tipping point is I met my now husband and we became serious really quickly. And he was in a doctoral program. And I knew enough about myself that I was going to be annoyed if he had more education than I did for the rest of our lives. So I was like, oh, you're getting the doctorate? Well, guess what? I'm going to too. And there was a program at the time, the Knight Foundation sponsored a program to lure working journalists into doctoral programs to become journalism educators. I applied for that program. Wonderful experience. And so moved into faculty role, doing faculty life. I started with another colleague, two other colleagues, and I was the first director of a documentary production program for our students. So I was making films with students and doing long-form journalism pieces with them, taught journalism, but also taught in a variety of core curriculum liberal arts contexts. And that was really a love and passion. I had studied as a liberal arts student and undergraduate. I had been the editor of my college newspaper, but was studying, English literature and theater, communication studies areas. So it was kind of blending all of those worlds. And I ended up accidentally in an administrative position because I was kind of strong armed by faculty colleagues into becoming the head of the faculty governing body because they were concerned about someone else who they thought might be doing that role and didn't think would be very good or effective. So I was a reluctant leader in that role and have been a reluctant leader in a lot of different roles in my career. But it's been great fun and I've learned a whole lot and I've been able to work. This will now be my fourth institutional context in terms of higher education, and they've all had some similarities and some really big differences. And along the way, I've collected a lot of skills that I can adapt into new environments. And I'm really looking forward to bringing all of that journalistic experience and the higher ed experience to Rollins College.
That provost position that you mentioned, you're coming to Rollins after serving as provost and executive vice president for academic affairs at Butler University. That sounds like a great position, so I want to know what's different about Rollins. What appealed to you about it?
It is a great position, and Butler University is a great university. And I will be honest, I'm having all the feels of the guilt of leaving a fabulous place and amazing colleagues. And so, this day has those mixed emotions with them, to be honest. And it's not maybe even the right time to be leaving. There's never right timing for some of these transitions. I was not actively on the job market at all. In fact, I would have never known about this position if I hadn't been nominated by a colleague who sent me a note and said, I know you always say, thank you so much. I love what I'm doing and I'm not interested in moving. And I do spend a long time at institutions, not by chance, but intentionally. But she said, just read the prospectus. And her husband had shared it with her and said, this is the job for Brooke, which is really flattering. And I was honored to see that. I read the prospectus and I was at first noting things that resonated. And I eventually stopped because I was noting the whole entire thing. And I have long admired Rollins College because I worked at Elon University where we benchmarked against Rollins. So I felt I knew a lot about the institution, having followed a peer institution for many years at the other institution that was following it. So I knew a bit about it. I had a dear colleague from Elon that came to be Dean of Admissions here. Her daughter is now a student here and she is still here. She invited me down in 2017 to offer some workshops to some colleagues in admissions and financial aid. And I just loved the collegial environment, the work environment, the kind of specialness of the place. I stayed at the amazing Alphon Inn and loved the idea of a nonprofit inn that produced that's, the revenue from the inn would go towards student scholarships. I was like, that's brilliant and amazing. And so I just found a lot of it to be charming. I thought Winter Park was an amazing place. I thought the access to the Metro Orlando area, that's almost like the Goldilocks just right situation of the residential liberal arts campus that is a little more comprehensive in nature and has some business programs and some grad programs and serves some adult and professional learners in this amazing town of Winter Park in the larger Metro Orlando area. So it was like the Goldilocks just right. So I explored this position, was exploring a presidency. And throughout my career, the past 10 years, I've had a lot of people ask me about presidencies, and I've always been honored that people saw that in me. But I still have a lot of imposter syndrome. Every job I'm in, I really think, oh, they're going to find out I have no idea what I'm doing. And I, really kind of still have that built in. So there's some nervousness and trepidation about it. And I finally, the last hour, decided to apply for the position. Thought, well, maybe nothing will come of this. And now, multiple interviews, and several months later, here we are. And I'm just really honored and very excited. And as we went through the process, I became even more excited about this position and this opportunity. But there'll be some mourning about leaving Butler University. Great colleagues, great students, and a really wonderful mission. Butler was founded in pre-Civil War Indiana by an abolitionist. And that's part of our DNA. And we get up every day imagining what it looks like to live into that mission. And that's really exciting. And we're just starting a new Founders College at Butler in the fall, which is a 2-year program that will be serving Pell eligible students in the Indianapolis and surrounding area. And I'm really sad to not be part of that future. It was really important to me to be part of creating that. But I'll miss a lot of those opportunities of exciting things. So ready to focus on really exciting things happening here, but definitely running to this position rather than away from a previous position or previous institution.
Okay. Can you talk to me then about some of the challenges that you're running towards, some of the challenges that you are welcoming with this new position?
Well, I'm still learning, so I'll know more about that as we continue along. I will say, kind of a little bit of the flip of that, there are many challenges that residential liberal arts colleges face that Rollins College is not. So there are some really important protective measures for Rollins, which is in really strong financial position, really great position, attracting just amazing students and able to, not only fill those classes, but shape and curate those classes with some choice among those students. And the access again to the larger metropolitan Orlando area. Many residential liberal arts colleges are in pretty rural areas, and that is becoming less attractive to students. And so there's a really wonderful protective factor in the location here, and then just long-standing tradition of high-quality educational experiences. Those are some really important things that that make Rollins able to withstand some of the headwinds that are coming our way in this space, in higher ed broadly and in liberal arts in particular. And then the challenges are demographic cliff and shift is a real opportunity to rethink a lot of things in higher ed as we expand the footprint of the learners that we serve, those thereby, identities, backgrounds, experiences, the programs they're studying in, as we really work to continue to articulate the value of liberal arts. It is very, very clear that the liberal arts are valuable for a good life, meaningful careers, productive lives. All of the things that we're hoping and wishing for in our students can be delivered through that liberal arts curriculum. And the way Rollins does that in particular is in an applied context and has experiential and high impact practices built in for students. So it's really the whole way of doing the liberal arts is very important, and the value is demonstrated in the specific way that Rollins does it is as well. So I think those are some of the things that make this an exciting opportunity. What we have to always continue to pay attention to is relevancy and culturally responsive education, and thinking about engaging in dynamic pedagogy and making sure that we are giving students the opportunity to learn how to learn, but to transfer that knowledge and to learn to be learners for a long life of learning, and thinking about sort of that nimble adaptability for all the changes that will come in their lives and careers.
When I'm thinking about the campus culture at Rollins, in your background, you were involved in development of DEI programming at Elon University. Now, I realize Rollins is private. Do you anticipate, can you talk about the challenge of creating a campus that would reflect that diversity, equity, inclusion principle in a state where our public colleges and universities aren't allowed to invest in DEI programs?
No, I mean, I do think that's a challenge. And the benefit of being an independent college is that you are in a different situation than your partners who are working in K through 12 or in public university education in the state. I do hope that some of that will change in Florida, in other states, and on the federal level in the United States, because ultimately the investment in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging is about the educational environment and experience and the workplace environments. And so every member of your community being valued, respected, a chance to learn about our differences, a chance to be better prepared to work in a globally interconnected world. That's the reality for colleagues and students, and the expectation of well-run organizations and educational environments. So I was delighted to see that in this job search process, DEIB and the commitments at Rollins were in the forefront in what they were seeking in a leader, and what they've already outlined as their strategic commitments to continue that work. And that work ultimately is the benefit of our students and our colleagues and the educational environment that we're trying to create.
Just to wrap up, you mentioned you really enjoyed Winter Park. We know Rollins has a reputation as a beautiful campus as well. Any other amenities, parts of Central Florida you're just kind of looking forward to experiencing?
Well, of course. I mean, there's a really rich arts and cultural tradition, lots of great sport opportunities. I come from a city that has sort of both of those as well, and that we have really enjoyed that in our 5.5 years in Indianapolis. We won't miss Indianapolis winter. We're going to figure out how to handle Winter Park summer. I'm sure that's going to be on our list of challenge. We are going to get better versed in water sports, watching, participating, and cheering, and maybe other things. I'm really excited to be involved in the vibrant life of the campus and all those things that the campus has to offer, but also the Bach Festival and the Morse Museum, and really in Orlando to be involved in sporting and cultural events and speakers in Orlando. We've already started looking at things and thinking if we were there, we'd be doing this and this and this. Now, we don't know what this job is going to be like for our ability to do any of these things, but we have like retiree level aspirations of our engagement in the community. We're going to have pretty full jobs, so we might not be able to meet those, but we're imagining all kinds of ways that we're going to engage in Central Florida, and every community we've been involved in, both my husband and I have deeply invested in that community, and that is our plan here as well.
Brooke Barnett becomes the 16th president of Rollins College in July. As 2024 winds down, we're taking some time to look back on the year and the work produced by the Central Florida Public Media Newsroom. We're checking in with our reporters and the stories that impacted them. Today, Central Florida Public Media environment reporter Molly Duerig joins Engage to reflect on what's been accomplished and some of the challenges that lie ahead. Molly starts our conversation by describing the reporting that she found most resonant.
Covering the flooding in Hurricane Milton, that was very impactful. We spoke with lots of residents in Volusia County who had thought that perhaps their flooding worries were behind them. They'd flooded during Ian and maybe a few other rainstorms in between, but they really thought that they'd shored things up and would be okay for Milton. And the quantity of water was, the way it came in was just too much for some parts of the county. And so that was really, really moving. And I did find myself connecting to that story quite a bit, just following up with those residents, hearing about the horrors that they went through from the flooding. It's something that has definitely stuck with me since and has helped motivate me to continue looking into issues around flooding, what local governments are doing to work towards solutions, and what communities are doing to recover.
Was there anything that came as a surprise to you this year during your reporting?
Yes, definitely. I think that why I love this job so much is every day is different. You're always learning something new. I mean, we come across surprises and sharp turns quite often in our reporting, and that's sort of just what keeps us, digging for answers. Something that did somewhat surprise me was learning that Florida is expected to have a water shortage as soon as potentially next year. And we're talking like drinking water. I mean, it came as a surprise to me, probably would come as a surprise to most people because Florida's waters are so important to us. It's what we talk about all the time. It's what brings in a lot of tourism and new residents to the state. Water is everything here, everywhere, but particularly here in Florida. So to hear that, potable water could be running short for some parts of the state as soon as next year, according to state data, that definitely was a surprise to me. There are groups obviously actively working on this and trying to come up with solutions. But that is definitely a fact that I think might surprise a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. That is startling to hear, even. Can you think, looking back, of a voice that you spoke with that really reflected the mission of your beat? Leaves you saying, this is why I do what I do.
Yes. And honestly, most voices that I speak with, most voices that I hear from do resonate with me in some way. I understand it is a great responsibility and a privilege to be able to speak with people from all different walks of life and hear what they're struggling with. And in that sense, almost every single voice that I speak with does resonate with me. So something that really runs through a lot of my beat is landscape conservation and really this tension between development interests and preserving the beautiful natural Florida that draws so many people here and has kept so many people here over generations. Tom Hochter, the director of the Center for Landscape Conservation Planning at the University of Florida, spoke with me at length while we were reporting for the Florida Wildlife Corridor project, and he spoke a lot about ecosystem services and really trying to navigate that balance between development interests and conservation. Obviously, we need money to keep coming into the state. We also need to preserve the natural resources, our waters, our land. That is why so many people love to live here and visit here. So Tom Hochter spoke with me about the difficulties with navigating that balance and the importance of helping people understand ecosystem services, like the real value that ecosystems provide.
Most people are aware of the idea of built infrastructure or gray infrastructure, our roads, right? Our transportation system, our houses, commercial development, et cetera. People are used to, that's things that people need. And green infrastructure is this idea that natural and rural lands, green space, provides certain values, including ecosystem services. And ecosystem services are a variety of values or services that ecosystems provide people and other living things.
I mean, monetarily and to our quality of life, these aren't just ethereal ideas. Quite literally, we depend on the water to survive. We need land. We need wetlands. We need to keep some wetlands to mitigate flooding. So it's not just a pretty picture to look at, but these ecosystem services have real value and real weight. And so Tom Hochter spoke to me at length about that and really helped crystallize a lot of things for me there.
Is there something you could share with us that you've seen positive movement on or some kind of change within your beat?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of activity this year in the environmental realm. Something quite recently here, we're talking at the end of the year, a very important thing that we just saw happen is FDEP, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, finally just filed a proposed rule for pumping Florida springs. And that's nearly 9 years after a state law passed requiring the agency to do that. You have nonprofit Florida Spring Council suing FDEP and coming in right at the last minute, right in time, just in time for that deadline. FDEP did finally file a proposed rule. And that is something that conservationists and just lovers of Florida springs have been waiting for many years now. So that is, I think, a sign folks had been rallying in support of that mission, had been pushing the state agency to act, and we do see that movement now. And I think that is definitely an example of the needle moving and progress happening.
Mm-hmm. In the time that we've been talking, I've just continued to hear, rightly so, just the theme of water and the different ways that we use it and perhaps the shortage and the springs you just mentioned. Is that something you say you have your eyes on in 2025? What are you looking ahead to?
Absolutely. Rising water, flooding is going to continue to be an issue here in Florida for the foreseeable future. It's going to be something that I will be keeping my eye on, that local governments will be keeping their eye on. We know that many, particularly coastal parts of Central Florida, are going to be inundated in the years to come with sea level rise. And we know that many buildings and many development interests right along the coast are funding those communities. The tax revenues from those buildings are funding those communities. And so that's just one example of how rising water and flooding is going to continue to come up. But even inland, further inland, as we see more inland flooding, with rain events bringing more rain, we're going to continue to see this issue. And we're going to continue to see the impacts of developing on wetlands the more that we do that. And so we're going to continue to navigate that very delicate balance of development and land conservation, natural resource conservation here in Central Florida.
Molly Duerig is Central Florida Public Media's environment reporter. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, tales of hauntings and Christmas Eve terrors told in Central Florida. The mind behind Phantasmagoria joins Engage to explain why telling ghost stories is his preferred way to get into the holiday spirit. Just a reminder, we want to hear from you. We want to talk about stories that you want to hear about. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. Send us an email to engage@cfpublic.org, or you can send us a talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app. In the menu, select Send Us a Talkback, record your comment, your question, your feedback, hit send, we will get it. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. There are so many ways you can tell a story. Through dialogue, spoken word, dance, puppetry, art, fire performance. The theatrical approach of Central Florida's Victorian steampunk storytelling troupe called Phantasmagoria. They combine them all and more. Their tales originate from legends and written works from centuries ago. The haunting horror stories are performed year-round, but right now their focus is on this festive holiday season. There are several December performances of Phantasmagorias and even more haunted Victorian Christmas. This troupe is keeping the spirit of telling ghost stories for the holidays alive. Byron is one of the creators and the director of Phantasmagoria. I began our conversation by asking him to describe Phantasmagoria in a nutshell.
We call ourselves a Victorian horror troupe. But the idea that we are a storytelling troupe as well is consistent. We tell stories at most holidays, actually. So we embrace literature from centuries past. We embrace original stories that are written directly for us. And we are very much a Victorian-styled storytelling troupe.
What does it mean to you? What resonates?
Oh, it resonates because we're keeping alive the stories. The whole mystique of Phantasmagoria is that this is a troupe that has existed through the centuries. And their entire existence is dedicated to keeping the stories alive, whether that be through the storytelling we do or through the dance we do, because we're also considered a dance troupe. We have a wonderful choreographer from the Orlando Ballet who works with us. And so our stories are told through movement, through dance, through the actual, spoken word stories that we do. And on stage, they all come alive. So it's not just sitting around hearing stories. You actually experience the stories, because that is, again, part of the mythos is that we are forced into the actual stories and bring them to life on stage.
So do you react to the audience, or is it more scripted?
Oh, it's scripted. This is, we usually take about a year to write each tour that we do. This will be our 16th year that we're going into next year. And so we, spend a year writing the stories, whether they're, like I said, adaptations of existing literature, or whether they are original stories that are written by either our members or by some of our outside authors that submit things to us. We also, during that time period, compose all of our original music, because it's all original music that we use for our dances, or music from like-minded artists who have given us their work so we can use it. So it takes about a year to pull together each tour show. And these are stories, some that people will know well. So, for example, in the Christmas tour this year, we're doing Canterville Ghost. So it's a well-known Oscar Wilde tale. And some that people don't really know. Christmas Comes Again, it's a poem that many don't know. It was the mid-1800s. It's very tragic, and the wonderful ghosts and spirits of the soldiers are in it, as well as original tales. This year we have an original tale of the Krampus that was given to us by Eric Keevan, a Seattle writer, as well as a lovely kind of sentimental ghost story called The Almshouse, which was written again specifically for us.
Will you connect the dots for me here? You mentioned being the horror genre. How does this take us to Christmas traditions? Does it harken back to perhaps Dickens with A Christmas Carol?
It harkens back from beyond Dickens. It goes. Remember, Charles Dickens was actually telling ghost stories because there was already a tradition to tell ghost stories on Christmas Eve. It goes back centuries. Because if you think about it, around the time of Christmas is also the solstice. So it definitely has a sort of pagan origins with it as well. It's also like the longest nights of the year are coming up. So put yourself in the place of somebody in the 1700s or the 1800s where there's no television, there's just a fire going on the hearth, there's candles burning. What better stories to tell than ghost stories? And, of course, some of the ghost stories, like Dickens found out, could have a wonderful theme that resonates with the season itself. Redemption when it comes to Christmas Carol, same thing with Canterville Ghost. So a lot of times this went back centuries and centuries, and Dickens is probably the one who made it the most popular. M.R. James is another author who became very famous for doing ghost stories for Christmas. In England, this is still a tradition. They actually do televised ones every year. There's a whole series of Christmas ghost stories. A new one pops up every single year. But in America, it's not the most traditional thing to do. So we hope that over the last, I think this is our 9th year doing Christmas tours. I hope that we are at least indulging in that tradition, if not bringing it back to some people.
Yeah, how did I think it was supposed to be a one-year project. How did that continue and grow into what it is today?
Oh, we don't know. In the words of one of my dearest friends, they came up to me in probably, I think it was year 6, and they just kind of looked at me and they were nodding their head and went, "You had no idea this was going to happen, did you?" I went, no idea. We wrote a show called Phantasmagoria. It was supposed to be a one-time show. that was being done for the Halloween season. And it went so well that in the middle of the run, this was at the Orlando Shakespeare Theater at the time, we had audience members coming up to us and saying, "Oh, this is great. I can't wait to see it again next year." And we're saying, we didn't realize there was a next year. So we all got together and we made the decision as an ensemble that we would try it again. But the caveat was that every year we had to do a new original show. So we put a lot of work onto ourselves. And the tradition has kept going. By the third year, we were doing special events and being brought into festivals and things like that. We started hosting festivals. We started adding different talents, whether it's the fire dancing or the aerial or the belly dancing. So it sort of evolved over the last 15 years going into our next year. So it kind of came of the people who are part of Phantasmagoria. It's not just myself who comes up with these things. They all do. And we devise as we move through the years. And it's been just a constantly growing experience. We've been brought to other states. We've actually had troops in other states, in Georgia, and we had a wonderful troupe for many years up in St. Louis, Missouri. A little thing called the pandemic put an end to that. But it's been quite wonderful doing it.
And how do you think it's evolved into what it is this year with an even more haunted Victorian Christmas? What can I expect?
You can expect some pretty scary ghost stories. At one point in time, as I was rehearsing this, I went, wow, these are really frightening, some of these. We have one tale that's in there called Horror, A True Story, which should be in our Halloween show because it's so terrifying. And the Krampus tale is quite frightening this year as well, but you also have a mix of humor. I mean, Canterville Ghost, if your audience members might not be familiar with it, it's a very funny story. It's a story of a haunting of Canterville Chase by this ghost who is probably not the best ghost in the world, and the American family who moves into Canterville Chase certainly gets the better of him. And it's also a tale of redemption, very similar to, as I mentioned, Christmas Carol. And it's a tradition in England on the holidays, but not here. But it's fun to do that. You also have some really poignant ones. The aforementioned Christmas Comes Again, a very poignant, thoughtful, heartbreaking, and heartfelt ghost story. And Almshouse might be a little too close to home for some people who might have an elderly relative who is leaving before they leave. Let's leave it at that. So someone who is slowly fading away, yet still has love in their heart. And it's quite a beautiful story.
Byron, as I'm talking to you, I'm getting, pictures in my head just from your descriptions. I'm wondering, who would enjoy the show? Who do you want to see in your audience?
That's a beautiful question because this is a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that everyone. We have 6-year-olds who come to our shows and love them. We, in fact, 2 of them who used to come to the shows and watch them are in the show now. One is 11 and one is 14. We have elderly audience who come. So we really run the gamut of all the ages because we are appealing to horror lovers. We are appealing to literature lovers. There's an appeal to theater lovers and, of course, dance. We've been honored with a number of dance nominations and awards over the years in Orlando. And so it's really nice to have this kind of wide range of attention and engagement in both age and style to our audience.
Byron is one of the creators and director of Phantasmagoria. An even more haunted Victorian Christmas is playing Sanford's Ritz Theater on the 19th of December. Performances are also scheduled in Lake County this weekend, and there's shows in DeLand and Orlando later this month as well. That is all for today's edition of Engage. We are back on Tuesday. Just want to remind you, we always want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about or what you're glad you heard. You can send us an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Or you can send us a talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app. And there's always voicemail. Give us a call, 407-273-2300, extension 246. Leave us one there. Just on a note, we are working on a segment, and we are wanting to speak to DACA recipients. If you are one, or you know someone who may be willing to talk to us to help us with this segment, please reach out to us. If you miss any part of this show today, you can always subscribe to the Engage podcast and listen whenever it is convenient for you. The program will be available on demand at cfpublic.org. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for the company. All Things Considered with Nicole Darden Crescent is coming up following NPR News.